Today on Broadcast, strong women who've turned tragedy into advocacy.
Katie Beers was held captive for 17 days in a concrete bunker. Why she's speaking out 20 years later and says that experience may have saved her life.
And when a painting contractor exposed two of her children to poisonous lead paint, she wasn't just going to sit back and take it. From Lead Safe America, Tamara Rubin will share her story and tips for all of us to take critical precautions.
Plus, broad topics. We're taking your calls at 661-298-5487.
Well, good morning.
Well, good morning.
Kim, Tatiana, our associate producer, is here this morning. Good morning. Today's topics, other than the broad topics in the next segment, were inspired. The show topic was inspired by you because nobody has taken tragedy and turned it into advocacy more than you have.
Well, that's not true, but thank you. There's lots.
Nobody
in this room.
Nobody in this room or listening. No, I'm kidding. But it was 21 years ago today that your brother Ron Goldman was murdered.
Yeah, it's a little strange. I think I'm buzzing. Sorry, maybe not. It's a little strange to think about it in terms of 21 years. To think of it that I've lived almost half my life,
right,
without my brother. Yeah, it's
how does it change over the years? I mean,
I don't cry as long. I have spurts of tears, like the shower was very comforting this morning. Mm-hmm. I just have moments where I get anxious, my heart starts to race. As the day progresses, it gets a lot harder because I'm very cognizant of time and schedule and his routine, and everything was documented, so I'm very aware of everybody's last moments.
Right,
so I can't help but be a clock watcher. Even when the clocks aren't around, I still feel it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there are so many people probably listening who can relate to grief and tragedy, but the rest of us don't really have that in the public eye. You know, we don't have people tweeting. I mean, it's all over Twitter. It's this person and that. Remember, and to them, it's just part of their life history.
Right.
And so, do you think, I mean, I guess it's all that you know, but do you think it's different for you because it's everywhere? I mean, references still, you watch new TV, there are constant references everywhere.
Yeah, it's good and bad. I mean, it's really in some ways incredibly comforting that people are still so supportive and loving and encouraging and wrap their collective arms around our family. But then there are those moments where it's like I just can't escape it. And
right.
Even if I want to just shut down, I don't always get to do that. And that part, I think, is hard. There's just never really a reprieve from it. I think, later this year, we've got a whole new television series about the trial. Like,
yes.
We need that. Just
yes.
Hulu.
Well,
why do we need it?
Well, who do you want to play you anyway?
I think right now they're still casting for Chris Darden. But I mean, even that, it's like, I think part of it, there's a whole new generation of people that are still being introduced to it.
Right.
It's still in the history books. It's being taught in classrooms across the country. And I think that's the part that trips me out. Mm-hmm. And so I just have to embrace it. And
so tell our listeners, what you've been doing. I mean, you're an advocate for victims and their families, and you're writing a book with so many.
I've completed my book.
Yes, tell them about Media Circus.
So before that, I sit on the board for the National Center of Victims of Crime, and so I help with policy and programs to help families that are dealing with some kind of trauma or tragedy. Last year, the year before, we were successful in starting the Compassion Fund, which is for families that have been struck by some kind of national tragedy, so like Newtown or Aurora,
right.
So that people can feel safe to donate money. It's kind of like a Red Cross, but for victims and survivors, and 100% of the proceeds get to the families. And then, yes, I did complete a book called Media Circus. It's actually, I think, going to print this week, perhaps, which is crazy.
Wow.
And I was really...
And you interviewed.
I did. I was really fortunate to interview 10 other families that were struck by high-profile cases.
Right.
And we talked a lot about the private grieving in the public eye. And from Newtown to Aurora to Eric Garner's family to Skylar Neese, who was killed by her best friends, to Sharon Tate, who was killed by Charlie Manson, and it's just really fantastic about what it's
Wow.
like to live your life in a fishbowl and grieve with the whole world watching.
Right. And people can pre-order that book, can't they?
Oh, you're so cute. Yes,
Am
on
I?
Amazon right now. It's called Media Circus. It is up on Amazon, which is awesome, and it's coming out September 22nd. Super excited. It's been a long journey, but it's been remarkable and such inspiring stories.
Yeah, and I just think that, for you to put yourself out there, you could very easily just do some, you go and you speak,
Yep.
and you speak with police and how they can be more empathetic to families.
I mean, I try to do as much as I can because there are so many families that don't get an opportunity to speak publicly and share their stories and make change. And I used to resist the public attention that our family received, but now I embrace it, and I feel very lucky that I get to talk on behalf of other families that don't always get that platform, to be able to teach law enforcement, media, how to be more sensitive when dealing with victims and survivors. I feel really lucky in that regard, so take it as each day.
All right. Well, when we come back, more incredible, courageous women who've turned tragedy into advocacy.
Stay tuned here on KHTS, your hometown station. We're taking your calls at 661-298-5487.
Welcome back. We're taking your calls, 661-298-5487. You can also comment on Facebook, on our page, and also Twitter at Broadcast Show. So, you like how I
Yes.
said that?
Yeah.
Best Friend Day was earlier this week. Everyone was posting. And we saw a topic that I had to ask, because we're, these are world, really important events. Question for you.
Okay.
Would you tell your best friend if their partner was cheating?
Yes.
Yes?
Absolutely. I mean, if we weren't that close, I probably wouldn't, but if it's my best friend, absolutely.
What if it were me? Would you tell me if my husband was knocking boots?
I could probably list the 10 people in my life that I would do that for.
Yeah.
And then there's like the next tier of people that I may not, because it's not my business, but yeah, I absolutely.
Really? What about you, Tatiana?
I would definitely tell my best friend if her man was cheating.
Yeah.
Because, that would be an awkward situation if I knew something and she didn't know something, and then she found out and she was like, well, you knew about this, why didn't you tell me? That's not really being a best friend.
Right. Would you try, we put this on Facebook earlier, and, would you try at least to tell him or her to tell their partner first, or
Is
would
it a
you-
husband or a boyfriend or
Well,
like a fling?
a fling, that's different. You're not
I don't
really
know.
cheating.
I guess it depends. My loyalty is to my girlfriend first.
Right.
I think I might do to the husband or the boyfriend. I know what's happening. I'm giving you 5 days to work it out. Otherwise, I might do that, because I'd also.
What if he says, all right, I'll end it and that's it? Are you still going to tell her?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Wow.
Would you? You're not answering.
Yeah, of course I would.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't. But some people will say absolutely not. So Tatiana, what are people saying on Facebook? Did you get anything over there?
Yes. Nicole said, yes, I would, right after I beat the living hell out of the cheater. And then, interestingly, we have Chris. He said, no, I stay out of it. You never know what rules they have in place that they don't tell their friends. I know a number of people with open and questionable open marriages who don't discuss it with their friends or family. I knew a couple of friends who are happy to stick their head in the sand and think all was well.
Oh.
Yeah, but I
That's
guess
a good point, though, like
if you have an
marriage.
open relationship, then if someone said to you, "Hey, I saw Bob hooking up with so and so," then they'd be like, "Yeah, we're totally in an open relationship." I mean,
Right.
if you're going to have an open, then it wouldn't be private if your spouse was out there with somebody
You can have
else.
an open relationship that you don't tell people. Yeah, but
Yes, but if you're
Yeah.
out in the public, being that way with, I don't know. I just feel
Right.
like you kind of have to take it as it comes if that's what your choice is, and good for
Right.
you. But yeah,
and there was a comment there by Melissa. Tatiana, what did that say? She said, that it actually happened to her, right?
Yes, and I have done it twice. Same way I would tell my daughter when her boyfriend cheated.
Oh my god.
well, and then there was somebody else that said that it kind of backfired on her a little bit.
Oh.
Right. I think there was.
Yeah, and there was one who said that she recently found out, and everybody knew. And so she wished someone had told her. That's the
Right.
thing. If my husband is cheating, please, I don't care if you're a stranger. Like somebody, like, I would rather not be played for the fool.
Right.
You know, I think, anyway.
Yeah.
So that's a really important topic.
Well, actually, one question I thought was,
Yeah.
I know that we're moving on, but somebody said, what if your best friend was the cheater? Right? Like, if I knew you were cheating,
Right,
would I
right.
tell Jeff?
Oh, yeah. Would you?
I don't know about that.
I think
my
that's
loyalty-
girl code.
Yeah. I don't know.
I would have, like, I've been in that situation. I've had a talk with my best friends who
Yeah.
were,
I think I would have a hard time being friends with you if you were doing that. So that might shift our relationship.
Right,
but I
right.
think I would probably have a conversation with you about why and all those things and try to get you to do what you need to do. But no offense to your husband, but I don't know.
I
think that
wouldn't
changes things.
tell. I would have a couple of rules, and one of them is please don't use me. You know,
Right.
that's one thing that happened to me before,
Right.
where somebody used me as their plans,
Right.
and I didn't know about it. You know, and no, you don't get to do that.
Right.
But at the same time, you know, I've talked to other people who may, other friends who may have been thinking about it or have gone down that road, and I do try to coach them not to continue. It never
Right.
ends well.
Right.
You know? So it's like,
Well-
if you got to be out of that other, the other relationship, make a clean break.
Right.
You know?
First,
So,
yeah.
All right, the other really important topic, we only have 2 minutes left of
Okay.
the segment. Is it okay to have...
I would have guest sex, like if you're in someone else's house on vacation or for the weekend, to hook up in their guest bedroom.
Yeah. What do you think?
I've done it.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's kind of hot. I mean,
Yeah?
it's kind of a little
Like,
risque.
At a friend or like your parents or like...
No, not at my dad's house. I don't even when
Because your dad's listening.
I don't know if my dad's listening, but when I was married in my house. And my dad would come to visit. I wouldn't have sex with my husband at the time.
Really?
I would have my ex-husband go up the stairs before me. I didn't want my dad to see me go up into my bedroom together. With
Really?
my-
With your
Yeah.
husband?
Yes, it was my dad. My
kinda
daddy's.
said something, but that kind of said something about your marriage.
Yeah, no, but in somebody else's house, I sure would.
What about you, Tatiana?
I've done it.
I think everyone has done it, but is it like a regular, like totally cool no matter where you are?
Yeah.
When I was at my in-laws, like I was like, don't even come near me.
Why?
With my husband, just because I don't know.
I feel like they
it's
know, like, come on, everyone knows what's going on.
Right.
Like, clearly you're together, clearly you're doing something.
Yeah.
So,
Does
But
it
I
make a
guess
difference
if
if
I
it's
have- oh, go ahead.
does it make a difference if it's your in-laws versus like?
Yes,
Okay.
it makes a difference on who it is,
Right.
And if my my kids are there.
Yeah, but like quiet sex can be kind of sexy sometimes. Like it's kind of I think someone made a comment
I've
that
been
just don't
married
leave
for
a mess.
almost 13 years. It's always quiet. I'm kidding.
Don't leave a mess.
Yeah, Lisa from Facebook, she
Yeah.
said, it's acceptable just as long as you are very quiet and leave no mess, which is kind of gross. She said, you wouldn't want to wake anyone up or have them find any evidence. How else would you be able to deny if asked?
Mm-hmm.
And it will save you the embarrassment of proof. Plus, even if you didn't, they'll assume you did. So,
Yeah.
thank you, Lisa, for that comment.
Right. I like we're taking 180s here. I mean,
We
on
are.
the
That was just a
topics,
light
yeah.
little subject, and
All
now we'll
right.
get back to it.
Okay, so coming up, could your child be poisoned by lead paint in 2015? Tamara Rubin says absolutely yes. Hear her story and tips for staying safe and healthy. You are listening to Broadcast on KHDS, your hometown station. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Broadcast. So, from the moment her sons were diagnosed with lead paint poisoning, she became a lead poisoning prevention and awareness advocate. Hear how Tamara Rubin has dedicated her life to help her boys and to keep other children from facing the same diagnosis.
Welcome, Tamara.
Hi.
Good
Hi.
morning. How are you?
Okay. Enjoying a sunny Oregon day.
Fabulous.
Really,
Thanks.
that's odd in Oregon.
That's thank you for joining us. So, give a little backstory of how your children were poisoned by lead paint.
Sure. When we hired a painting contractor, we asked him if he was trained and certified in lead-safe work practices, and he said he was. We made sure he was licensed, bonded, insured, registered with the contractor's board, but we didn't know to check to see his lead paint training certification. This was about 10 years ago, prior to the new legislation that's been passed, and it wasn't as well known. And we just believed that he was trained and certified. And then he went on and used the most dangerous and illegal methods to remove the paint from our historic home, including open flame torch burning of the lead. to prep it for painting. And so my baby was 7 months old, and the contractor told us, since we were only working on the outside of the home, that it was safe for us to stay in the home, but the fumes permeated the home and my babies inhaled them and were instantly poisoned.
Oh my gosh. And so what did that look like? I mean, when did you first become aware that they had been poisoned?
Yeah, what happened to us is really rare because we had acute exposure. Most often, lead poisoning has no symptoms at all until later developmental stages like ADHD, ADD, autism spectrum symptoms and such. But because we had acute poisoning, when right away my kids started acting differently. They were holding my 3-year-old was holding his head. He had headaches and was pointing to his eyes because his eyes were hurting him. And both kids were vomiting and had diarrhea and basically had a bunch of flu-like symptoms, so constipation followed by excessive diarrhea for 2 months. And that started right away when the paint removal process started. And we called the doctor pretty much daily to find out, what we should do. And they kept saying, "Oh, don't worry, your kids don't have a fever, so just keep them hydrated and they'll be fine." They didn't even suggest that we get them tested for lead paint poisoning because that's not something that people commonly get tested for here in Oregon.
So how long did that process take that you were able to connect that it was the lead paint?
Well, 2 months later, my kids were still sick, and my son woke up in a pool of feces. Always fun. And I said, "Okay, that's enough. You guys stop telling me not to come into the doctor." So I took him in, and they tested him for absolutely everything, and he came back with lead poisoning. Wow. And then they didn't suggest to test the baby, who was then 9 months old. But I said, "Wait a second, I want to know why my son is positive." I still didn't think it was from the paint job. I had no idea because I was, didn't understand what that whole thing looked like at that time. And so they tested the baby and called me right away. He had a blood level 16. They said, "Move out of the house immediately. Your child has lead poisoning."
Oh my gosh. And so you have 4 boys, and the older 2 were not poisoned.
Actually, it's a sandwich. I have an older one who was at summer camp during the repaint job, and then I had another baby after those 2 were born.
Oh, okay.
And because I was fastidiously checking their lead levels throughout the whole process, even though we moved to a newer house, because 92.5% of the homes here in Portland are pre-1978 and have lead hazards, even my baby did test positive because all of my neighbors were renovating.
Oh, wow.
My gosh.
So, I mean, this is, I would think, in 2015, right, I mean, you don't have to worry about stuff like that. But clearly that's not the case. I mean, what should people be aware of as far as like in their homes and businesses? I mean, what are the laws? What are the rules here?
Well, just because this is a short interview, I want to make sure people know about our website because we have a lot of the information there. That's leadsafeamerica.org.
Mm-hmm.
And it's .org, not .com.
Okay.
Excuse me. And the thing that people need to be aware of is that any pre-1978 home can have lead paint hazards. That really, it's 1 in 3 American homes. There's 80 million homes built before 1981 in our country, and it's much more prevalent than people think. And I even got an email this morning from someone in public policy saying, we don't want to scare the parents. We're really careful about that. I'm like, no, okay, no.
Yeah,
yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the main thing is that for decades since this became legislation, the lead paint ban, the public policy people have been afraid of creating mass hysteria. And as a result, kids are getting poisoned every day from renovations and soil disturbances and urban living. And the main thing is that right now it's middle and upper income families that are doing renovations and gentrification on older housing that aren't getting tested, that are at highest risk because there's no interventions if you don't do a blood lead test. So the main thing is I recommend all children get blood lead tested regardless of their living situation.
Wow. So we want to keep you on for the next break, next segment, if that's okay, because we still want to talk a little bit more about Lead Safe America and what you're doing there as executive director, and also directing your first documentary. And we definitely want to hear about that. So,
and I think also it would be great if you could share some hidden dangers and some other things. I know you gave us a little bit just now, but some other things to look for as families are making changes to their homes, and what we can look for with our contractors, and some of those tips to make sure that we're all safe.
You're listening to Broadcast on KHTS. your hometown station. Welcome back. We are talking to Tamara Rubin of Lead Safe America. Thanks, Tamara, for staying with us. So, one question: what does lead paint poisoning look like in your children?
So mostly there's no symptoms, and that's the biggest concern. It might look like the flu if they had an acute poisoning with no fever, but generally there's no symptoms, and there's no way to tell if your child's been exposed, and that's why in America the most proactive thing we can do is get blood lead tests on a regular basis. I recommend 9 months and 18 months, so like pre-crawling and post-crawling, and then annually after that through the teen years, because we have had cases of even teenagers getting poisoned through, for example, hobbies and art projects and different things, and there's no reason to not do a blood test.
Well, how would you treat it when you find out that they are in fact poisoned?
Well, it causes permanent brain damage and causes learning disabilities and behavioral disorders, and in adults it can cause kidney, and liver, and heart dysfunction issues, and so it's very serious, and there are not a lot of treatments, and the main treatment is prevention, so that's why blood lead testing is key. And so if a child tests positive, we always recommend, if possible, that the family move out of the home until the source can be located and remediated. And so you had asked earlier about what to do about it, and the main things are, test your kids, test your home, either with your home inspection prior to purchase, or find out if your landlord has done a lead inspection. In California, they're a little more proactive about that than anywhere else on the planet, so you're lucky there. But in other states, they're not. And then make sure you know what the hazards are, what the potential hazards are, and take care of them when children aren't in the home. And then after any hazards are taken care of, a clearance test needs to be done to make sure there's no dust hazards left. And the main thing about the dust hazards, which is the primary means of children being poisoned, is that it's invisible. It's not dust you can see. It's a sugar packet spread across a football field. So if you had a sugar packet worth of lead dust spread across a football field, that's enough to poison a child.
Wow.
So Tamara, before you became, an advocate, I think that's the thing that people are surprised about when tragedy strikes your family. You have some choices, and you chose to go down this path of advocating for other families so that they, wouldn't follow in your footsteps. What did you see your life this way? Did you have that advocacy gene in you, or is it just something that you just couldn't walk away from?
I've always been an environmental activist. My parents were hippies in the 60s, I was born in 1969. I think it's part of the, role. When I first was a homeowner, I was into historic preservation, and my first home I bought when I was 26 and pregnant. And the very first thing I did before moving in was I had the asbestos removed from the ceiling. It had a popcorn ceiling with asbestos, and it had air vents in the ceiling. So I've always been kind of aware of toxicity in homes, but I didn't know that was my calling. And in fact, after my kids were poisoned, I kind of spent 2 years as a victim, kind of really mad that the system was so broken, that the laws weren't enforceable.
Yeah.
And then I decided, okay, I'm going to try and change this paradigm. And I first started by trying to change the laws, and I realized that that's broken.
Yeah.
The whole legislative process. And I said, how else can I address this? And I realized that through being on the Today Show and USA Today and all these other outlets, I realized that the best tool we have in preventing lead exposure and other toxicity issues is telling our stories so other parents listen.
Right.
So that's why I created Lead Safe America and started working on my film. Because I thought that film was the best way to reach mothers, especially documentary film.
Absolutely.
And if you can reach your target demographic that way, it's compelling, it's emotional, and you're telling a whole bunch of stories of mothers of lead-poisoned children across the country. So somebody's going to resonate. One of those moms in the film resonates with every audience member. So it makes that impact that we wanted to make, and people take it home.
And where are you in the process of releasing the film?
We're in post-production, awaiting that last $100,000 donation.
Oh.
It's been kind of crazy, but I do everything in challenging ways. And so what we decided was the film is a project of the nonprofit, Let's Save America, and we've got over 900 people have donated something to make the film possible.
Wow.
And that includes Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey of The Who are donating music.
Wow.
And, Noam Chomsky is in the film, and the band Fish, John Fishman, the drummer, and his wife, Briar, are producers of the film. Peter Coyote has offered to donate narration. So it's a real team project, and we just need to do, picture finishing, sound finishing, some final editing.
Were you surprised at how many people came to support you and to to be on your team throughout this process? I mean, did you think it was going to be isolating, or are you shocked to have so many people be in your corner?
I'm shocked and thrilled and so happy. And, my editor said, there's no way Pete and Roger are going to donate Behind Blue Eyes to your film. They've never done that before. And then they said, of course we'll donate it. You have perpetual lifetime rights to Behind Blue Eyes for your film.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, my God. And it turns out that Roger's family, when he was a kid, worked in the docks in England and did, boat painting, which was lead paint, and they had lead exposure.
Wow. And so how can people help you, Tamara?
How can they help me? They can, if they have money, they can donate it because we're a nonprofit, 501c3. It's tax deductible, and we appreciate that. And we also, give direct support to families whose kids have been poisoned. And we provide free lead paint test kits to families all over the country. We distributed 16,000 last year. If they don't have money, they can like our Facebook page for the film, which has over 8,500 likes right now. It's facebook.com/MisLEAD movie. And also watch the trailer to the film and share it with their friends, because we created the trailer as a really quick, easy tool for people to share about the message. And then finally, if they would like to test the paint in their home, we do give away free lead paint test kits, and there's a form on the website on the top menu bar that says, request a free test kit, and they can do that.
Right. Well, before we go, because we have about 1 minute before we have to go to break, you're talking about homes that were built before 1978?
Yeah.
Okay, so people who have homes that are newer than 1978, do you not have this problem, or should they be equally as cautious?
They need to be concerned about their water delivery methods, because under the Bush administration, water supply pipes that were up to 8% lead were able to be marked lead-free.
Oh, wow.
And that just changed this year. That was just changed this year. So if you
Okay.
have, get your water tested.
And what about toys? Is that still a concern?
Choice is not as much as a concern. On the website, on our Facebook page, I do X-ray fluorescence testing of household goods, and that's one of the most popular things I do. And I test, your grandmother's antique Pyrex, bowls have like 200,000 parts per million lead, which is really, really toxic. And, I'm more concerned about antiques, antique jewelry, costume jewelry, than I am about current modern toys, which are all very carefully regulated.
Right. Even when they come over from other countries, do they have the same regulations?
The recalls make big splashes in the news, but they're really rare comparably.
Okay.
You're like Mythbusters.
I know, right?
For lead paint poisoning. I love it.
Yeah, Mythbusters. Those guys probably have lead poisoning. We've watched all of their episodes, and they use lead and they melt lead. They put their hands in melted lead.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you guys nuts?
I think that one of the things that we are so appreciative for what you're doing is educating and knowing where your strength and your attention should be focused. So thank you so much for being a pioneer in this and for taking your tragedy and doing something great with it, so the rest of us can feel safe. So
Absolutely.
thank you,
Tamara Rubin of leadsafeamerica.org. Thanks, Tamara.
Thank you both.
Coming up, she was abducted by a family friend at the age of 9 and held captive for 17 days in a concrete bunker. We talk with New York Times bestselling author Katie Beers.
Stay tuned. You're listening to Broadcast on KHTS, your hometown station. Welcome back. You are listening to Broadcast here on KHTS. So we have Katie Beers on the line. Katie it's funny, I've known Katie through friends for the last couple of years. We've never officially met. We've talked and we share each other's stories. But anyway, so Katie's going to be joining us. She was abducted by a family friend at the age of 9, back in 1992, and she was held captive for 17 days in a 6-foot by 7-foot concrete bunker. I'd rather not editorialize and summarize your story for you, Katie. So welcome to the show. But
Welcome, Katie.
Thank you for being here.
Not a problem. Thank you, Kim. It's nice to meet you finally.
I know. One of these days we'll have to meet midway across the country and have a glass of wine together.
Yeah. Sounds wonderful.
So, Katie, tell your story. I don't want to take anything away or add anything to it. Just we always love to hear from you specifically. So tell us what happened when you were 9.
Of course. Well, when I was 9 years old, I was abducted by a pseudo family friend, somebody that had been in my life for 9 years. He was my biological brother's big brother, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And he took advantage of a perfect situation. I was a child that really didn't have supervision. I didn't have any adults really looking out for me in my life. And it was just a perfect scenario for a child predator to swoop in and take advantage. I was held for 17 days in an underground bunker, and within that 6-by-7-foot bunker, there was a smaller coffin-sized box, basically, and that's where I spent 23-plus hours out of the day, was in this really tiny box. And yeah, I endured physical abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse, you name it. Basically, I endured it.
You know, one of the things that I read was that you left a message for your grandmother that you were being abducted by a man with a knife. Did you leave that message on a voicemail or something like that?
What happened is John Esposito, the man who kidnapped me, he wanted to videotape or record me on a little machine saying, I've been abducted by a man with a knife, and oh my God, here he comes. And so I recorded that, and he had left when he asked me to record it. So I'm sitting there, 9 years old, recording it, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to wait a couple seconds, and I'm going to say I'm at Big John's house, because that's what we called him. Mm-hmm. Well, he apparently was smarter than me, and he listened to the recording before he went to play it, and he heard me say that, and then he physically assaulted me and made me re-record it. That time it was a little bit more genuine because I was crying hysterically.
Right.
But yeah, so he played that. He was hoping to just play it straight for my ex-godmother, but it ended up being on her machine, which helped FBI and law enforcement in the long run.
Were there interactions with him that kind of red flags before this, or did it just kind of come out of nowhere?
With me personally, absolutely not. And here's why. I really didn't spend very much time with him one-on-one. Mm-hmm. Usually if I was with him, my biological older brother was with us, or really that was the only time that I was ever really with him. But the day that he had, or the weekend that he had kidnapped me, I was visiting my godmother, and my biological mother told my godmother that I could not see John Esposito. Did not tell anybody why. And I found out years later, probably I was 20 years old when I found this out, that the reason why I was told that I wasn't allowed to see John Esposito on that day is because he had sexually abused my biological brother.
Oh, jeez.
So, yeah, but why Marilyn, my boss, or my biological mother, why she didn't tell my godmother who I was visiting this information, God only knows.
And that's where you were abducted. Was that your godmother's house?
Yes, I was visiting her for a couple days between Christmas and my birthday.
So I would imagine it's got to be hard for you when you hear these horrific other stories about kids that have been abducted for days on end. And, you know, what do you feel when you see those stories? I mean, I know that the year that the Ohio story came out and those three young girls, those three women, that it was the same year that your abductor died. They're telling me we're gonna have a minute, so I don't want to rush you, but I just, I know that it has to evoke some kind of emotion in you when you see other stories of kids being kidnapped at young ages.
Yeah, I'll say it this way, yes and no. And the reason why is because I feel sadness for the victims, and I'm always constantly praying that they're found, as everybody else is. But through therapy, I've kind of, I guess the best way to describe it is I've distanced myself with my childhood, so I don't let the bad that happened in my childhood, I don't let that overpower my future.
Wow.
So we want to keep you on for the next segment and talk about, why 20 years later you decided to tell your story in your best-selling book. But we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with Katie Beers, KHTS, your hometown station.
Welcome back. If you are just joining us, you're late, but we are still happy you're here. And you are listening to Katie Beers. She is a New York Times bestselling author of Buried Memories. Katie was sharing with us that she was held captive for 17 days when she was 9 years old by a family friend. And we were talking offline about healing. And
so Katie, you were saying that you were able to remove yourself a bit from other stories of abduction and abuse. Is that therapy kind of connected, or because of therapy, is it connected to why you were able to write about it 20 years later, being disconnected?
Absolutely. I mean, part of the years of therapy that I had gone through was not necessarily geared at making me forget what happened to me by any means, but it was geared toward making me be able to accept what happened and being able to deal with what happened. Because I was not only abducted, I was also sexually abused and raped by my godmother's husband for 7 years. So there was a lot that happened. I was an emotional wreck. So the main point of therapy was helping me be able to deal with everything.
And so you said that your experience may have saved your life, the experience being kidnapped. How is that?
Yes. I would say that the kidnapping, and media always loves it when I say this, the kidnapping was actually one of the best things that happened to me. Not the act of kidnapping and not what happened while I was kidnapped, but the fact that something had to be done to get me out of the abusive situation that I was in my godmother's home. Every day, daily, I would be sexually abused by her husband, and there was no real way to get out of it. And my biological mother got me out of the household and tried doing that, but then would let me go and visit them. Mm-hmm. So she was getting me out of the household, but wasn't really doing anything.
Right.
So the abduction got me out of not only the abusive situation, but it also got me out of a very neglectful childhood home. I can't tell you really how often I actually lived with my biological mother. I spent a lot of my childhood living between my grandmother and my ex-godmother. Mm-hmm.
So what is, today, I mean, you sound, I mean, I know that it's deceiving sometimes, but you sound strong and healthy and adjusted. What is your message today? I mean, what do you want people to take away from your story?
Regardless of what happens to you, any trauma can be huge if it's not dealt with appropriately. And I just want people to see from my story that you can go through something really traumatic and you can overcome it. You can overpower it. You can recover from it and go on and live a normal life. So often you hear these stories of victims of sex abuse, child abuse, bullying, that because they didn't receive any sort of therapy and they weren't able to process and deal with what happened, they go on and they don't know how to live as adults, or they don't have a meaningful and fulfilling adulthood. And to me, that's a tragedy.
Right.
That they can't. And I see this even with my biological half-brother, because he was 16 and a half when I was kidnapped. He should have been removed from our biological mother's home, but he wasn't, because he was, quote unquote, too old and a lost cause.
Oh. Right. Yeah, and so you're also, very vocal about other. I think that your voice with other situations, like the Dugars, is that how you say it? Duggar?
I don't know.
You have strong opinions about what happened in their house. We only have a minute left, but what are your thoughts on that? Where the son was known to have sexually assaulted, his sisters while they slept.
My standpoint on that case is mainly for the victims. I think it's horrible that the victims were outed before they were ready to come forward, even though the media never said their names. But there were only 4 girls when the abuse was happening, so you can infer who it was.
Right.
And, regardless of what happened in the home, the Duggars dealt with it how they felt was appropriate. And nobody's really to judge whether it was appropriate or not. That's for them in law enforcement to decide. I don't agree with it, but that's just my personal opinion. I'm not in their shoes, but I think that the victims being outed was a tragedy.
Right.
Well, I think, Katie, you chose to take control of your story and to tell it on your terms. And I think that's something that many of us don't get the opportunity to do. So kudos to you. For those people that want to know more about Katie, you can go to katiebeers.com, and you can also read her book, Buried Memories. I don't know how long it was on the New York Times bestseller list, Katie, but you kicked ass on that book. So congratulations to you. And I'm so glad to finally meet you on the phone.
Yes. Thank you, Katie, for joining us, and thank you, and thanks to Tamara Rubin. And let's keep the conversation going at Broadcast Show on Twitter and on our Facebook page. And for a video of this podcast and others, check out Broadcast Show on YouTube. That's it. We'll see you next week.